Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by, and welcome to the Safety Training for 2013 webinar. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. If you need to reach an operator at any time, please press *0. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded Thursday, July 11, 2013. I would now like to turn the conference over to Adam Langley. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for our complimentary webinar, Safety Training for 2013, brought to you by Workplace Answers. Your presenter today is our very own Brooke Fernandez. And whether you're a regular with our webinars or join us for the first time, we're happy to have you online with us today. A few housekeeping tips before we get started. All audio will come through your computer speakers, so be sure that your volume's turned up. You may submit questions at any time today by typing them through the chat feature located to the left of your screen. We'll take note of these questions, and a representative will get back with you sometime after the webinar. If you're on Twitter, you can also engage with us there during or after the webinar. And be sure to follow us. Our Twitter handle is @WorkplaceAnswer, not answers. Unfortunately, we will not be able to provide the actual PowerPoint slides from the presentation today, but registrants and attendees will receive an email with a link to view the recording and download a document with some key takeaways. You may receive a call from one of our reps after the webinar to ensure that you receive the link to the recording, get your thoughts on the webinar, see if we may be able to assist you with any of the issues discussed today in the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to chat with them. And we'll be conducting a few polling questions during the presentation. Just click the radio buttons to select your answer. All answers are private. Nobody's going to see them, but we'll be able to see the results as they come in. Before we get going, we're pleased to announce that launch of over 30 new safety courses here at Workplace Answers. We're offering a limited time promotion as part of this webinar. Starting now through the 30th of September, we're taking an additional 10% off all safety courses. This includes the bundles and multiple safety course options, which Brooke is covering today. So stay tuned for how to take advantage of this promotion later in the webinar. And without further ado, I'd like to turn the call over to your presenter. Please go ahead, Brooke.
Well, thanks, Adam, and again, everybody, thanks for joining us today. I wanted to just kind of get quickly into it because we've only got 30 minutes. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about safety training and what's important to remember. A lot of times in our industry, with regard to safety training, there's a lot of questions about, well, this is the type of environment I'm in. I'm a higher ed or I have an office setting. They really need to do safety training. And as you can see, safety training really applies to a variety of industries and a variety of office settings and industrial settings. And even places like retail establishments that deal with the public. So regardless of what type of workplace you have, safety training is important. And what's important to remember also is that a lot of these safety topics we train on seem very obvious and they seem very kind of common sense to a lot of people. But in the end, it never hurts to remind people what they should be doing in their office and what they shouldn't be doing to keep themselves safe. And we'll get into a little bit of the statistics later, but some of these things like slips, trips, and falls and defensive driving, safe lifting, for example, if you're in an office setting, fire prevention. Some of these things may seem very intuitive and natural, but it never hurts to remind each other to keep a safe workplace and to really protect our bottom line. It's important to train people on these topics. And before we really get going, this presentation that we're going to be talking about today is generally about what are the best practices in safety training, why should we be doing safety training in general, and why should we be doing it online, and then also kind of what are the new HAZCOM standards, there's some new rules with regard to HAZCOM, there's a new training mandate with regard to HAZCOM coming up December 1st of this year, 2013, and then some general safety topics that are always good to cover when you're onboarding new employees. So why we should be training people that we're onboarding into our organization, some general safety concepts, and why that's a good idea. As you can see, it does apply to all industries. And interestingly, you may not know this, but most of the injuries that happen in the first 6 months an employee is employed in your organization. So if you're conscious of that, makes sense to try and prevent any kind of accidents or injuries that may be happening to those newbies that are in your office, because they just don't know your environment. So before we get going, really, I wanted to just find out what people are doing with their training today. Do you guys have, those of you on the call today with us, do you guys have a formalized safety training program in place? And can you answer the questions? Let me see. Anybody? Oh, great. So we got some answers coming in. Good. Most of you guys are doing classroom style, which is great. We have a mix as well, which is also excellent. And some of you don't do training in safety. That's okay too. But that's why we're here, to kind of talk about maybe some of the ideas around what you should be training on and what's most important to kind of cover to get a good baseline of safety training in place for your organization. One of the things, after we see that, okay, great, we've closed that poll out. Next slide is just if you are doing training, love to hear kind of how you're tracking it. Are you doing paper logs? Are you doing certificates? Or are you doing electronic records? Just curious on that front. Okay, paper logs, a lot of sign-in sheets, great. The reason we're asking these questions is it's really to kind of help get a baseline for the general understanding of what's important to train on and how you're doing your training. A lot of you that are doing training already today in a classroom setting, those of you that are environmental health and safety directors, your time is really well spent doing hands-on training. There's no substitute for that at all in the world. So we think that the best use of online training is to train people on those 101 concepts, those basic concepts that everyone needs to know that are really the true basics of any safety program. And when OSHA comes knocking, and what they really want to see is not that you have a training program that you've done once. They want to see that you have an ongoing training program and that your records are kept not only clearly, but they're kept off-site. And from an administrator's perspective, what we find is a great benefit of online training is that the electronic records through our learning management system are easily queried at any time. So you can produce a report with a click of a button. You don't have to go into files and diving into people's records to get their certificates out or anything like that. You know at the click of a button who's taken which course, and also consistency is important as well. So those of you that are have multiple locations and you're sending a trainer out to multiple locations, even in stand-up training, the environment's different every time. There are different people in the room every time. So to really make sure that everyone's getting the same information and the trainers remember to say everything that they've meant to cover, online training is a great benefit for that too, because it guarantees consistency. So those are some of the aspects of why online training is good. But it's great as a complement to what you're already doing in your stand-up world, because there's no substitute for teaching someone how to properly use a machine or how to properly be safe in their particular work environment. So just to give some people some baseline on information on what's going on in OSHA today and what types of violations we see in the market, as what the top ones are: falls, slip, trips, and falls, and HAZCOM, which we're going to be talking about later on in the presentation, which is the proper labeling of hazardous chemicals. Those are the top two for the last year or so, and scaffolding and some of the others. But basically also on the workplace office injury list, you see slips, trips, and falls, fatigue, stress, topping the list as well. I don't know if many of you know this, but the average slip, trip, and fall claim is $29,000. And that's just if the person is injured. If there's a death, the average payout is millions. So as you can see, some of these things, they may seem very obvious, but in fact, if you're not training people, if you're not educating your workforce on how to be safe in an everyday environment, you're not preventing the exposure that you could be. What's interesting also is just for the cost of a few computers, and just the training itself could be $5 to $10 per person depending on the volume. For the cost of that, you're preventing $30,000 of risk, and even maybe potentially millions of dollars of risk. So you're saving thousands, and not only productivity by doing online training, but you're mitigating your risk substantially. And these are the types of things that we see in typical OSHA investigations. Now, why do we do training? well, obviously we want to prevent accidents, lost employee time, lawsuits, all of these things. And all of these things are very obvious to the average environmental health and safety director. But where are the decision makers weighing in on this? I wanted to show you some stats first at the state level, and then at the some surveys that we've seen for business owners. So first, let's talk about some of the stats around state level mandated training. So we often hear in our industry, no one really likes to take mandated training. No one likes that training is required. But the fact of the matter is, when you mandate safety training, it works to reduce incidents, period. And these statistics show that. And they're very powerful and compelling. So what's interesting is, even in North Dakota, they tied that into their workman's comp insurance program, and they actually offered a discount. And that's where they saw them. We've seen, obviously on this slide, 38% decline in incident rate over 4 years. But even in Massachusetts, 20% in just 1 year decline in incidents. It's pretty powerful stuff. I mean, in terms of when you require training and you make people learn the information on learning how to be safe in the workplace, it does work to reduce incidents. And what I was getting at earlier is around the benefits of effective workplace safety programs. When you're asking the financial decision makers, the COOs, the CFOs of the world, the people that are holding the purse strings for these kinds of training programs, or funding them or defunding them, they're saying that the increased productivity and the cost reduction by offering safety training are the top benefits. So not only does safety training work, but the decision makers in the finance department and the people that are looking at the bottom line numbers also feel that these programs work and are a good business decision. So why are we doing safety training? I mean, the message is clear. It saves lives, it reduces injuries, it lowers your costs, not only on insurance and workers' comp claims, but also on lawsuits and potential investigations. It also increases your productivity and your morale. It helps people be more productive in the workplace and have a safer workplace, obviously. But why train online? Safety training, we know why we should do it, but why should we do it online? Well, it's consistent, it reaches everyone, it's verifiable, it's easy to track, and it's more productive. And let me give you an example of how it's more productive. Those of you that are doing a lot of classroom-style training, you know that you have to pull people off the shop floor or off of a particular project to bring them into a classroom to train them. Imagine if you didn't have to pull them off in a group. You could do it sequentially. So for example, if you had a break room with a kiosk or a computer lab, or if you had a bank of computers somewhere that anyone could access at any time of the day, or even at home, that way you're not taking people off of a shop in a block. They can do it sequentially whenever it's convenient for them. So you're not losing all that productivity out of all of those people in one big chunk. You're actually staggering it out over a longer time horizon, so you don't lose as much. That's one huge benefit of online training that we see in a manufacturing environment. Hazard communication, that's what we said we're going to talk a lot about today. So I wanted to just cover a few of the very important points about hazard communication and the new standards, because like I said earlier, December 1st, 2013, there's a new requirement coming down from OSHA. You have to have trained people by December 1st, 2013. So for the first time in 30 years, OSHA is changing the hazard communication standard to come in line with the internationally recognized globally harmonized system, or GHS. I should have apologized in advance for all the acronyms, but I'm going to start throwing a lot of acronyms around now, so just get ready. The negotiations are 7 years in the making and started in 2005, and the final rule was passed last year. And the training must be completed, like I said, before December 1st, 2013. So the real core of the new changes is going from right to know, which is what we've been doing for the past 30 years, to right to understand. So now workers in the past, they were just, you had to post the SDS, or formerly MSDS, you had to post that, label it. But now the training component of this new law and the training component of the harmonized standard now says you don't need to just know the information, you need to understand it. And we'll get into some statistics later, but OSHA is saying that by migrating into this new right to understand world, we're going to be preventing more injuries and more fatalities. So it's not so much just right to know, but right to understand. So that's an important point. Why are they changing it? Well, they want to increase the quality and consistency of information provided to people. They want to use single words and simplify the information so it's not so confusing. Make it very visual through the pictograms. And also unify it in English. They're requiring it to be posted in English and then a few other languages if you want to add those languages, but you must post it in English. And they have a standardized format now. So basically, we live in a global economy where chemicals are imported and exported around the world. And with the new standardized system, it's just going to be easier for people to communicate in the workplace and know what the warnings are. So it's just really, again, around understanding and make it easily understood by everyone, regardless of their level, and whoever comes into contact with those hazardous chemicals. What's also interesting, too, is we were having a discussion around hazard classification earlier, and just what is a hazardous chemical. And a lot of you on the phone today may not realize this, but bleach, household chemicals and household items like bleach, 409, Windex, things like that are actually hazardous chemicals. And we'll get into the new definition of who's required to be trained in a couple slides. But basically what's interesting here is we might not realize the types of chemicals we're coming into contact with, even if we're just in a standard office setting or even if we're at home. And how those chemicals can react if combined, or if combined with water, for example. That's why this is so important, because the training component, unless you train people on what hazardous chemicals are around them, they're not going to realize that standard household things they come into contact every day with may in fact cause a hazard for their workplace. So the four major changes are obviously the hazard classification, the labels, the safety data sheets, and the information and training required for these. And we'll get into each of these areas in a second. But for example, in the information and training, you must train the people to handle chemicals appropriately, any workers who may be exposed. There's a new 16-section format for the safety data sheets, and the labels have been changed. We talked a little bit about that. And we'll show some labels in terms of the pictograms in a moment. Okay. So what does this mean for employers? Those of you that are on the phone joining us today, what must you do with regard to this new standard from OSHA and this new globally harmonized standard? OSHA is saying it's going to affect over 40 million workers in 5 million workplaces. And they also are saying that it's going to prevent 43 fatalities and 585 injuries and illnesses annually. They're estimating that the new training, labeling, and SDS information is going to save lives and reduce injuries. That's why they're doing it. But as an employer, you can imagine 40 million workers and 5 million workplaces. It's quite a lot. It's rather extensive. So let's talk about the law. Each employee who may be exposed to hazardous chemicals when working must be provided information and trained prior to initial assignment to work with the hazardous chemical and whenever the hazard changes. So there's two components here. The may be exposed, and that's with regard to their daily working environment. So for example, if anyone is in a front office, they might be exposed. But if they don't work with something in a regular course of business or in their regular course of their job, they might not. But what's most important is what I mentioned earlier with regards to what is considered a hazardous chemical. And there are some details on the OSHA website that can explain a little bit more in detail about that. But as I mentioned, household chemicals, things that you come into contact with every day, actually can be determined to be hazardous. So you need to be very careful if you have any kind of cleansing agents or anything like that in your workplace. Let's get into some polling questions. This is a question for those on the line. Do employees need to label hazardous materials they take to their work area for their own use? So this is really a question for those of you out there. Let's show the results. Yes. And it's a bit of a trick question, because if the employee takes a hazardous material for their own use, where they're always monitoring it, and where they will use all of it before their shift ends. For example, if someone takes a chemical from a stock in a beaker to use at their workstation, It does not have to be labeled. So if they're going to use all of it, if they're taking it, it's going to use it all before their shift ends. But if they give it to someone else, or they do not monitor it at all times, or they do not use it all up during their shift, then it needs to be labeled. So there's a lot of circumstances under which you might have people sharing items at a workstation or borrowing things if they run out. Then those chemicals and those materials need to be labeled. They're hazardous. It's a bit of a trick question there, but you guys did great. What are the 4 components to hazard communication? You have to have a written plan. You need to have your labels and warnings. You need to have training, and you need to have safety data sheets. So as we mentioned, hazard communication standard was enacted in 1983, and then it was modified in 1994. But in 2012, it was updated to align with the UN GHS. Some of the minor language changes were hazard determination, which was changed to hazard classification. And then MSDS is now just SDS. So it went from material safety data sheet to safety data sheet. So there's also some major changes to the hazard classifications, the standardization of labels, and the standardization of SDS that I'll talk about in a second. So with regard to your written plan, what does it have to include? Well, it has to identify, label, and maintain an inventory of the locations of the dangerous chemicals. You have to identify the jobs that are required, that require the handling of those chemicals. You have to make the SDS documents available, which I'll have a polling question on in a minute. And you have to have someone who's responsible to maintain those. And you have to periodically inspect controls and update those, and I'm going to talk about those in a second. And then you have to detail the training guidelines for those chemicals. So what are controls? The controls include engineering controls, which are physical means to control and reduce exposure, administrative controls, which are policies and procedures for safe handling, and then proper use of PPE, personal protective equipment. So how do you properly use that when you're coming into contact? What's required when you're coming into contact with these chemicals? Here's some examples of the labels and warnings. These are the new labels, and as you can see, they have a bold red outline around them and a very simple picture in the middle. They also have to have a signal word, and also they have to have very clear English labels, and I'll go into some of the detail on these in a minute. But they're pictograms, they have a hazard statement, and they have precautionary statements, and they also have manufacturer contact information. So this is all kind of coming back to that understanding. It's not just I've posted the pictogram and I'm expecting everyone to be a mind reader and know what it means. I need to now train people to make sure that I'm protecting my workplace and protecting my employees, doing my due diligence, doing my duty to them to make sure that they truly understand what these warnings mean. Now onto the SDS, the safety data sheets. We're not calling them MSDS anymore, so the material part's been dropped off. These are just safety data sheets now, but they've been simplified and made more uniform to include the hazard information, what the chemical is, what the emergency response is, what the controls and protections are, what the ecological, transferred, and disposal information is, and there's a new sheet format, 16-section format that we have to comply with. Training. You need to be training your people on what chemicals are present, how to use them, transport them and dispose of them safely, and how to protect yourself. What are the engineering controls, what are the administrative controls, and what is the personal protective equipment required? All right. I said I had a polling question on safety data sheets. Anybody know if we can have them on a computer rather than a hard copy? What's the safest, most conservative thing to do? It is acceptable, yes. So I see that you guys are saying, yes, it's acceptable to have the safety data sheets on a computer, but it's a bit of, again, a bit of a trick question here too, because the answer is you can keep your safety data sheets on a computer in the employee work area, but only if all employees are trained to use the system and have full access to use them whenever necessary. So to be the most conservative, we always recommend that you err on the side of caution and post the hard copies of the SDSs as well in the work area. But you can absolutely have them on a computer if that's the most common use of the technology in that particular person's job or work area. But again, it doesn't hurt to err on the side of caution and post those SDSs in a hard copy. Okay, a couple pictograms here. I just want to show you guys some of the new pictograms that you need to be training people on before the December 1st deadline. As you can see, the labels are relatively simple, relatively straightforward, and in English. And they've got the bold red outline. Carcinogen, cancer-causing, mutagenicity. I didn't even think I pronounced that correctly. Mutagenicity. Sorry about that. Capable of causing mutations. And you can cause, if it's reproductive toxicity, it can cause damage to the reproductive organs. These are the very simple labels that people need to know and understand what they mean. And like I said earlier, you can put these labels in other languages in addition to English, but you must have them in English. Okay, exclamation mark. Stay here for a second so you guys can read this one. What's interesting here about this one is that the hazardous to the ozone layer is not mandatory for chemicals manufactured in the U.S. under OSHA. That's simply because OSHA doesn't have oversight over the environmental hazards. Those environmental hazards are outside of the jurisdiction of OSHA. Skull and crossbones. Flame over circle, oxidizers. Exploding bomb, explosives, organic peroxide, self-reactive. Corrosion, gas cylinder, and environmental not mandatory. Okay. The SDS update, again, I mentioned the 16-section requirements. This is a new format, new standardized format for all safety data sheets. These are the sections it covers. This is what you need to be either posting on computers, or at minimum we think you should be posting them in hard copy. Question for you guys. What percentage of your staff who works with the chemicals understands the MSDS or the new SDS today? How do you guys think you're doing on the understanding component already? All right. So again, getting back to kind of the new mandate from OSHA, we're going in a direction where it's no longer just appropriate to just post the information and make sure people know it. They need to truly understand it. So training obviously helps with that, online training and in-person training. Let's keep moving. Next question: Do you think these new safety data sheets will make it easier or harder for them to understand? Do you guys agree with OSHA? Everyone's thinking if they're agreeing with OSHA. That's great. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we're seeing that any kind of harmonization, any kind of simplification is always better. So, OSHA is obviously very keen on rolling this out, which is why they're requiring training. So, okay, a couple things we also think are important around training is new employee safety orientation. And if we have time at the end, I might show a few of these. But basically, the new safety new safety orientation for employees is helpful because it begins on day one. It demonstrates that safety is a priority for your organization. And as I mentioned earlier, most of the injuries that people experience are experienced in the first 6 months of their time on the job. So the benefits of the online training is that if you host the training in a classroom style, then you maybe even can't get to them within the first 6 months of hire if they're hired after you've hosted the training. So the nice thing about online training is that you can do it on a rolling basis. So as people come in and as people get hired, you can enroll them in training rather easily. make sure that they got it, make sure they get the information. And we're recommending that you train on the top 5 or top 8 things that affect your workplace, typically like fire safety, slips, trips, and falls, obviously, hazard communication, things like that. But just really doing a very high-level, simplified approach to these topics is a good best practice that we're seeing out in the industry. So this is a typical thing, typical kind of topic list of what you should cover for your new employee orientation around safety. So like I mentioned, slips, trips, and falls, fire safety, back injuries, ergonomics, hazard communication, bloodborne pathogens, personal protective equipment, and defensive driving. So any vehicles, and we were talking about this yesterday, you may not think of it this way, but even a golf cart or a maintenance cart could be considered a vehicle. So defensive driving and good driving habits apply to a variety of different settings and vehicles. So I wanted to stop here, and this is a short presentation today. We only had 30 minutes. But I wanted to just give you guys a high level of what types of safety training are good best practice, what the most important training courses are out there, and why you should be training people when they first onboard into your organization. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to the final slide. If anybody's interested in talking about training programs with us and how we can help you get your online training program better, either online training program more successful, get it started up, anything like that, we can help you with. But I also wanted to just, while I've got you guys on the line here, I wanted to just show you a few programs that we do have that are new, because I know we talked about the new 30 courses that we've got that are new. We've got Lockout, Tagout, in addition to HAZCOM, which is the big one we've got to cover before December 1st. In addition to the new employee safety onboarding, we also have Lockout, Tagout. We've also got asbestos. We've also got personal protective equipment. We've also got a few others here. Let me just get to those. First aid and CPR, slips, trips, and falls, emergency preparedness, fire prevention, ergonomics, workplace violence. So we've got a few of these new programs that, and as Adam mentioned, there are 30 of them. So wanted to just let you guys know that we have all of those new courses in the safety section. And getting back to that. Thank you. Adam, I think we're ready to close it out.
Thanks a lot, Brooke. Yes, so again, if you're interested in taking a look or getting a demo of the safety training courses, just get in touch with your account managers, and they'll be happy to take you through a tour. Thanks a lot for joining us. Again, thanks for Brooke for a great presentation, and follow us on Twitter. It's at WorkplaceAnswer, and hope to join us again sometime. Thanks a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the webinar for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your lines. Have a great day, everyone.